sport management students. Hope everyone's doing well, having a good first semester. Welcome to the second episode of the sixth season of the Brock Sport Management Council podcast. Today, I'm hosting with Dylan Charn, who's back for his second year with the podcast. He's in the third year of the program and will be serving as the podcast producer for this upcoming season. So pumped to have Dylan on. But without further ado, we're going to pass it to Dylan to introduce our very special guest for today's episode.
Yeah, right on. Thank you, Cole. So today on the podcast, we are pleased to be joined by Mr. Dan Shulman. Many of you know his voice. Born and raised in Toronto, Dan is a Canadian professional sports broadcaster, currently serving as the play-by-play announcer and moderator for the Toronto Blue Jays. He also works for ESPN as a play-by-play commentator for Saturday primetime men's college basketball. In 2011, he made history by becoming the first Canadian-born announcer to win National Sportscaster of the Year. And this past summer, he got to fulfill a lifelong dream of being the voice of Canada's men's basketball team at the 2024 Paris Olympics. So without further ado, we're very excited to welcome Dan onto the podcast here.
Thanks for having me, guys. Dylan, Cole, glad to be with you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we'll just jump right into it. We understand that you actually graduated from Western University with a science degree.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about how you came from that to becoming, where you are today?
Sure, it's a long story. I mean, I'm so old. Well, it changed recently. To me, it's the University of Western Ontario, but I know to
Right.
you guys, it's Western University. But go Mustangs back in the day. But yeah, I was an actuarial science major, which is a math degree, like hardcore math, insurance, pensions, numbers, numbers, numbers. While I was at Western, just looking for something to do, I volunteered at the campus radio station, CHRW. And I was not in a broadcasting program or journalism program. This was just something I was doing on the side for fun. I never had any intention of going into it for a career, to be honest with you. But once I graduated and started working as an actuary, and I don't want to I'm not maligning the actuarial field. I just decided after a few months, I don't think this is for me. Whatever you got to do probably for like 40 years. And I thought, let me give this a chance. Let me give something else a chance. So, I remember going to my parents and saying, hey, I'd like to give radio a try. And I'll make a deal with you. If I can't really get anything going in a couple of years, I'll go back to school. I'll get an MBA. And I wrote the GMAT to kind of defer acceptance for an MBA, that sort of thing. So I had a backup plan in theory. And I just started, again, I'm old, so this is 1990. I started couriering out cassette tapes of my work from CHRW at Western. Most people, didn't answer, didn't respond, didn't take my call. But I got one part-time job at a station in Barrie that's not even the same station anymore. It was CKBB back then. And I started working for $6 an hour on a part-time basis on the weekends while I was still working as an actuary Monday to Friday. And one thing led to another. It's a long story with a lot of sliding doors moments and just good luck and good timing and hard work and that sort of thing. And eventually I got to what is now the Fan, although when I was there, it wasn't even the Fan in Toronto. It was still CJCL, the music of your life, just with a little bit of sports mixed in. And then while I was working there, ESPN radio heard me, and then the Blue Jay job opened up, and it's a long, long, long story, but it's still one when I say it out loud. It's sometimes I can't believe it because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just wanted to do something I enjoyed.
Sounds surreal. It's definitely not a traditional path. Usually when you hear sports broadcasters, anybody in sport media, it's direct. They graduated with communications or a sport
Yeah.
management degree. So it's pretty cool to see, the different path.
I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, for people your age, if you want to get into it, I would recommend you go through the proper channels and do the right things. But again, I wasn't pursuing a career in it. So I kind of fell into it sideways and had some, really nice people mentoring me that I was working for and showing me the ropes because I didn't have that 3-4 years in school as a background. I did have a fair bit of practical experience. When I was at Western, I did a bunch of basketball games, a bunch of football games, a bunch of hockey games, and I had a talk show. I was a co-host on a weekly talk show. So I had experience, but it wasn't considered, real experience, right? Because it wasn't in the workforce. But I got this opportunity in Barrie. And then, one of the biggest breaks I ever got was getting to CJCL, again, what is now known as the Fan. And, I had to work my way up, obviously, from the very bottom part-time. But they saw something in me and put a lot of time and effort into me and gave me opportunities. And then, like I said, just a stroke of luck. Jim Houston was the Blue Jays announcer in the early 90s, and he left after the 94 season. And by 95, I had already kind of established myself in Toronto radio. I was doing all kinds of stuff at the Fan. And they auditioned me, and I didn't get it right away. They called me back about 2 months later after they said no right away, and then they said yes. So whoever they said yes to, and it didn't work out for that person, thank you very much. I don't know who it is, but I wasn't the first choice, but I was the guy who got the job, and that probably was the biggest break I ever got, was getting the Blue Jays job at TSN in 1995.
TSN Blue Jays. That's funny to hear now. Was it
Yeah.
always, did you want, a baseball or basketball? What was like the main goal coming in, looking in sport radio in the future?
Well, initially, I just wanted to get a job at a Toronto radio station
Right.
because I'm from Toronto and I kind of want to live, I wanted to live in Toronto. Number two was I wanted to do something in sports. So that was it. When I got to CJCL, I was a sportscaster, top of the hour, 3 minute sportscast, Maple Leafs beat the Sabres 5-3, like just that. That's what I was doing. And eventually I started doing some of the pre and post game shows on the Fan for Maple Leafs games and Jays games. I was the happiest guy in the world. I thought this is great. This is what I'm going to do for my whole career. I had done play-by-play at Western, as I had mentioned, but I don't know that in 1993, 94, I said, I want to get into play-by-play. I certainly never thought about television, and I certainly never thought about ESPN. Those were way beyond where my mind was at that point. So just being at the Fan was great. As soon as I got the opportunity at TSN to do the Blue Jays in 95, my life changed. I mean, that's when I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And all of a sudden I was a major league broadcaster, right? Without any baseball broadcasting experience. I mean, I knew baseball and I had done pre and post game shows, but I had done a total of one inning of baseball play-by-play in my life before I auditioned. Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth, whose names you may know. I hope you know. They're the
Yeah.
broadcasters for many, many years for the Blue Jays. I was down at spring training doing the pre and post game shows and whatever. And Tom offered me the chance to do an inning of play-by-play in the spring of 94, I think. And that was it till I auditioned for the job. So, but as soon as I got there, I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I just have easily could have been, I think, could have wound up. I mean, I do basketball, but basketball could have been my first thing, whereas it was baseball. It could have been football or hockey. Back then, I was kind of the classic four-sport guy. I didn't watch auto racing or golf, didn't know a little bit of tennis, but not much. But I followed the big four sports equally. And as you guys know, in fact, before we came on the air, the first sport we talked about was football because of the jerseys, the Brady jersey hanging behind Cole there. So, but my break was in baseball, and as soon as I started doing that, I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And then TSN gave me some hockey and basketball opportunities. That's when ESPN came along. They heard me doing baseball, and they offered me baseball. And then they said to me, do you do any other sports? And I said, I've done some basketball. And like 2 months later, I was doing college basketball. So that year from 94 through the end of 95, my life changed an unbelievable amount, more than I could ever imagine.
Right on.
Yeah. Well, it's just another fantastic reminder that you got to take every opportunity you get. I know you said you only worked one inning, but if it's your passion, you got to go for it and take that leap of faith. And it's worked out pretty well for you. So,
Yeah, I
that's
mean, I'm thrilled and blessed and all that. And even going back before to Western, my parents kind of instilled in me and my sisters, don't just take classes, get involved, join a club, do this, do that. And I wanted to write for the Western Gazette, the newspaper there, but it was Frosh Week, and I was 18, and there was a line of like 100 people. And when you're 18 and there's a line of like 100 people, you probably walk away. And that's what I did. I actually started walking back to my dorm, and I walked by a door that said Radio Western. That's all it said. And I knocked on that door, and that changed my life. So one of the things I try to pass on to young people is get involved, knock on that door, because you don't know what's on the other side. And you could have 99 knock on that doors that don't amount to anything. But if one of them, just one of them amounts to something, it's all worth it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible that you were on your way to do to volunteer for journalism and
Yeah.
writing, and then that opportunity popped up and you took the chance. So another great reminder there. But for our next question, this one's just a pretty standard one, but what are some of your favorite aspects or memories of being a professional sports broadcaster, and what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome throughout your career?
Good question. So, memories, I mean, I'm a huge sports fan. I imagine you guys are as well. Um, you know, getting a chance to call the World Series on ESPN radio, which I did 12 times. I mean, holy cow, you know. Getting a chance to call Blue Jays games, being a Toronto guy, getting a chance to go to the Olympics and call basketball this year, like I did in Paris. Getting a chance, I love basketball, getting a chance to do college basketball, to go to Duke or Kansas or Kentucky or North Carolina or places like that. Again, I've been so lucky and so blessed to have great experiences. So with that, it's just, you know, being at these cool places, working with people who have become my friends, you know, who might have already been in the business or might have already been athletes, professional athletes when I was 18 years old or 21 years old. And now a few years later, I'm working with these guys and I've got his phone number and we're going out for dinner together, whoever it may be, you know, things like that. But mostly it's the memories of the games and the places that I've gotten to go to. Challenges, which is just as good a question because nothing is perfect and everybody should go into things with their eyes as wide open as they can, is if you're looking for a 9 to 5 career, don't do what I do. It's not a 9 to 5 career. And there are 9 to 5 careers in sports broadcasting, but not very many of them. Obviously, I work a lot of nights and I work a lot of weekends because that's when most games are happening. And being a play-by-play announcer, I go where the games are. So, you know, when the Blue Jays are home, I'm down at the Rogers Center, obviously. But when they're on the road, I'm on the road with them. College basketball is entirely an on-the-road job for me, wherever I may be. So it's a lot of time away from home. It's a lot of miles, a lot of early morning flights, that sort of thing. But, you know, the pluses outweigh the minuses many times over. But you know, you have to try to strive to have a work-life balance to the best of your ability. You know, I know a ton of people work 9 to 5 and then they come home and they're with their families every night. And on weekends, they're off and they go to a friend's house for a barbecue or they go to the cottage or they do this or that. And those kinds of things are very difficult for me because I just don't have that kind of schedule. So it's something you've got to understand and manage early on in your career.
Right. You talked about you know, some of the favorite parts being just the memories of the location and the teams. Is there any specific game or call that stands out to you in your career that's prestigious?
Yeah. I mentioned the World Series. The first one I did
Right.
was 2011. And for the casual baseball fan, I don't think they would remember. It was Texas against St. Louis, and that may not jog anybody's memories, but it's one of the great World Series that was ever played. In World Series history, which is, I don't know, over 100 years, 120 years, there have only been 3 times where a team was a strike away from winning the World Series and didn't win it. And 2 of those 3 times were in Game 6 of that World Series. So I call it the David Freese game. David Freese hit a home run on the 9th to tie it and then hit a home run on the 11th to win it. And then that was Game 6. And then the Cardinals won Game 7 the next night. So the combination of that being the first World Series I had ever done and, you know, the excitement of that game, that's up there. I called the Cubs winning a World Series. There are very few living people who can say they have called the Cubs winning a World Series because it had been so long. So when they won in 2016, that was amazingly cool. I called for, not for Sportsnet or anything, but for ESPN Radio, I called Jose Bautista's bat flip home run against Texas in 2015. That one is up there. College basketball. I've been so lucky. I do all the Duke Carolina games. If you hear banging, my dog is trying to get into the room to say hello.
That's all
So
right.
she might give up, she might not. I get to call Duke Carolina games, which are the biggest games in U.S. college basketball. Unbelievable programs and rivals. I don't do the Final Four because that's on CBS and I work for ESPN. So, but I get to do amazing regular season games. Like already this year, I've done Kansas, North Carolina, and I've done Duke, Kentucky, and I'm doing Duke, Arizona next week. So things like that. And then honestly, one of the biggest ones, you mentioned the Olympics. So before the Canadian men, the basketball team, could get to the Olympics, they had to take care of business at the World Cup in 2023. And I called those games for Sportsnet, and I called them remotely. I was in Toronto. I was not in, I think they were part Indonesia, part Philippines, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. But that to me was one of the most exciting things I've ever called, because I'm Canadian and I'm a big basketball fan, and the Canadian men hadn't been to the Olympics since 2000. And that moment where they beat Spain in a game in which they were trailing almost throughout to clinch a spot in the Olympics was fantastic. Now, unfortunately, the Olympics didn't go as well as we would have liked, but both the Olympics and especially the World Cup, just wonderful memories for me.
How is calling a game remotely versus being there? Like, what are some really big
Mm,
differences?
It's a lot harder. It's way harder for baseball than it is for basketball.
Right.
Basketball, you can pretty much see everything. You can see the court, you can see the ball, you can see the 10 players. So it's not really that hard for basketball. The one thing, or a couple of things, you don't feel the energy as much when you're not there. And, little things like if there's the whistle blows, you might not know, was it a foul? Was it out of bounds? Why are they going to the monitor? Things like that. Baseball is way harder, like way harder. So imagine there's a runner at first and he's trying to steal a base. I may not see that. Now, the only time I called baseball games off a monitor was during COVID,
Right.
was 2020, and then the first 4 months of 2021. So, if the camera is on the pitcher or the hitter and the runner takes off from first, you might not see that. If there are runners at first and second and there's a base hit, is the runner getting the wave? Did the coach give him the wave? Where's the relay? Where's the throw going? Is it cut by the relay guy? Did the trail runner try to go first to third? Is he caught in a rundown? Like, you can only have one camera on a screen at a time. When you're at the field, your eyes can, I look at the monitor to see the pitches, but I look at the field when the ball's hit. So my eyes can bounce around and see things pretty easily. Calling things off a monitor, especially in baseball, is a much, much harder thing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah, I didn't even think that didn't even occur to me though, which is funny that you wouldn't see things like that. The infamous wave from Rivera at third base. Like those are things that calling a game from without being there live, that's very difficult to do. So yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and yeah, that's pretty incredible that you did a full season, obviously shortened because of COVID, but
Yeah.
with the Blue Jays for the 62 games or what it was.
Yeah,
Um,
60 games that year. But again, then the first 4 months of 2021, they didn't come home until July the
that's
30th.
right.
So 60 games in 2020 and probably almost 100 games in 2021. Now, back then, they tried to give you a little help because, in 2020, they tried to give you a little help. All teams were doing things remotely. So, if the Blue Jays were playing the Twins, the Minnesota broadcast would give us some extra camera angles, what's called an all nine, a camera up above home plate to try to see the field and where the defense is. So you'd have like the main game over here, and then you'd have what's called a quad box over here, another screen with 4 extra cameras. So you did get a little help. By 2021, I think that was gone because we were in a unique situation, being the only Canadian team with crossing the border back and forth. Other teams had started traveling again. We hadn't. So it was challenging, but all you can do, and this is another, I think it's a good life lesson about anything. You just got to do the best with what you got. It doesn't make any sense to complain about it. These are the rules, these are the restrictions, whatever it is, and you just do the best that you can. And but yes, it is much better being able to do a game in person.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And then briefly here, you talked about the Summer Olympic Games, as well as the other basketball international tournament that you were calling. Is there any major differences that you've noticed between professional sport here in Canada and organized major events overseas?
In how they are broadcast, you mean, or the level of competition?
Broadcast, run, everything, really just the behind the scenes matter between sport management and sport media.
Yeah. I mean, when you go to an Olympics, obviously there's more security than if I were to go to a Raptors game or Leafs game or a Jays game or something like that. So traffic, travel, security, all of that. And when I'm in Paris doing the Olympics, one side of the arena is basically set up for the media, because let's say there are roughly 40 different countries calling that game. you've got 40 different broadcast locations. So, we made friends with the Croatian guys. They were right beside, with the Serbian guys. I'm sorry, with the Serbian guys, they were right beside us. Made friends with the Australian guys. They were right below us. So you're meeting people from all over the world because that game, the pictures you see here in Canada are exactly the same as the pictures you would see in Serbia, Australia, Argentina, or anywhere else. You can't have 40 different camera crews. There just isn't the room in an arena. So everybody is seeing the same pictures. Every country is putting up its own graphics in its own language on those pictures. And then each country has its own different announcers because the two of us just take up a little bit of room. So it's a different kind of experience. It's called a world feed. Like when I'm doing a Blue Jays game or a Carolina game, I can say to the director, hey, Dylan's getting ready to check in, or Cole just picked up his second foul or whatever, and he can get me a shot of that player. So I can tell the story as that player is being shown on the air. You always want what you see and what you hear to be in concert with one another on a broadcast. On a world feed for an Olympics or a World Cup or anything, we don't control the cameras. The cameras are the cameras. So we're calling the play and then the whistle blows and they're going to go to a timeout. They're going to show us two replays going to timeout. We don't know what they are till we see them on the air. It'll always be one from one team and one from the other. We know that. But was it Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's basket or was it Dylan Brooks's block? We don't know till we see it. So you kind of got to be on your toes and you kind of got to understand, hey, this is going around the world. And again, you just try to do the best you can. And I know 99.9% of people watching would never have thought of what I just said and may not still even get it. But it is a very different kind of broadcast. But you're appreciative of being on the world stage and broadcasting an event of that magnitude. And, I felt it even being in France, how much it mattered to people back in Canada, how many people were excited about the men's team being there. The women's team has been there many times before, so I don't mean to leave them out. But the bigger story, I think, because they hadn't been there for 24 years, was the men's team making it. Unfortunately, neither team did as well as we would have liked them to have done. But it is cool. You get a chance to meet a lot of people from all over the world, and it only happens once every 4 years, so it's a big deal.
Do you think your creative freedom is limited at all when you can't, control where the call is going to go next and you're almost confined to what's about to be shown to you first?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, you tend to call the play more. So, I mean, I can always say that's the third foul on Brooks and he's going to the bench, even if they don't show him on camera. It's still my obligation. That's important information. Dylan Brooks is going to the bench. So, but yes, you don't. It's not as loose or as a call. Part of it is basketball versus baseball too, but. To compare, say, the Olympics to a college basketball game that I do on ESPN, when the director can get me any shot that I want, or he can tell me something I haven't seen. KJ Adams sprained his ankle. They're taking him down the tunnel to the locker room. We've got a shot. So I know that's coming on the next whistle. I don't know that at a FIBA game. So, yeah, you just you got to stick to it. And you got to be on the monitor as much as you can for a world feed. Because you don't know what's coming. When I do a college basketball game for ESPN, when the play's going, I'm never on the monitor. I'm sitting at courtside and I'm watching the court. I'll go to the monitor at a whistle because we might have a replay or we might have a graphic. But again, the producer is in constant communication with me, or the director, or both, about what we're going to see. Or I can ask for something, or they can give me something, they can tell me something, whatever it is. So yeah, it is a little bit more of a straight line, connect the dots thing when you do a world feed.
Yeah, if you pair that with some of the FIBA rules, and that's a tough job, with just the one feed and the camera angles. So, I think how much do we got? We got about 5 minutes.
10 minutes
here.
coming down is the Zoom I can see. We got 9:50 left. So yeah, we got one more question here. Which one you want to pick, Cole?
Yeah, I think probably the next one. It's just because the Jays were it was mid-season, and then obviously you had to go to Paris to broadcast the Olympics there, and you're working with ESPN and Sportsnet. So how does that kind of all work out? I know the Jays and college basketball, like, they're operating at different times. for the most part, maybe spring training overlaps a little bit in that March
Right.
area. But yeah, just kind of how do you manage that schedule and any like tips and tricks for that sort of deal?
Yeah, if you have the kind of life that I have, you've got to be a planner, or it helps a lot to be a planner. It helps a lot to be really comfortable with your calendar app on your computer, have it sync to your phone. I put everything in my calendar, but you're right about the Blue Jays and college basketball don't really overlap. They're a little bit in spring training, yes. So my last thing always for ESPN is the ACC tournament. And then after that, there's basically usually a week or 10 days left of spring training. So the Saturday night, I'll finish the ACC tournament. I'll fly home Sunday, empty the suitcase, fill up the new suitcase, and Sunday night or Monday morning, fly down to Florida and spend the last 8, 9, 10 days down there and do 4 or 5 games. And I do try to do a couple of games earlier on too. There are some weeks for ESPN where I just do Saturday games. Sometimes I have a midweek game as well. So I'll go to my ESPN boss and say, hey, they've asked me to do these 2 spring training games on the Tuesday and Wednesday of this specific week. Can we block those off? And they'll say yes, because that's the only thing I ask of them all year. So those 2 work together well. The Olympic thing is a bit of a different thing. I've always wanted to go to an Olympics and call basketball. So it's something that I had in my baseball contract with ESPN when I was doing baseball for them. And it's something that when I came back to the Blue Jays, to Sportsnet, I discussed with them and asked if I could keep that in my contract. And they were very nice to say yes. So they know every 4 years there's a chance I'm going to be gone for 18 days or whatever it is. The other 3 years, I don't take off as much time, and I certainly don't take off that much as long of a time away. I do get a little bit of time off. I don't do all 162 games, but I would never be gone for 18, 19 days if it weren't for the Olympics. So just, very grateful to my bosses at Sportsnet who understand how much this means to me. And they know that the Blue Jays are my top priority, but they are nice enough to allow me to sneak away for 18 days every 4 years to call the Olympics if I want to do it and somebody wants to hire me to do it. So it's all just about scheduling and relationships and being open and upfront with people and having everything, spelled out clearly on both sides so there are no surprises for anybody.
With doing so many different things like that, do you still get some sort of pregame jitters, or is it all calm routine now? It's easy.
I don't think I get jitters anymore. I mean, this is my 30th year doing play-by-play
Right.
for college basketball, and I just finished my 30th year doing it for baseball. My first baseball game in 1995, I was a basket case. My first ESPN game, September that year, I was very nervous. Eventually, I got to Sunday Night Baseball, and I was very nervous. I mean, John Miller was and is a legend, and taking over for him was a pretty intimidating thing. I don't ever feel like that anymore. So I wouldn't say jitters. I get excited, obviously, and some games mean more than others. And if for whatever reason, maybe I don't feel, oh, did I do that thing I wanted to do? Did I look up that thing I wanted to look up? And, because you have some time before the game, but sometimes you can't predict how much or things will happen. So if I don't feel like I'm 100% as prepared as I want to be, that bugs me a lot, but I try not to get in that situation. I work very hard to prepare as much as I can. So I would say the jitters are gone. Even at the Olympics, I was excited, but I wasn't nervous.
Yeah. I mean, awesome. I think we covered all our bases here. It looks like we're
Yep, I think so.
coming up on the end of our time. Is there anything that you'd like to say to our listeners? Maybe offer some advice for some people looking into the sport media, sport broadcasting industry?
Sure. And I guess the program at Brock is more sport management, right?
It is,
Sport
yeah.
media.
Correct.
So I guess it's
Yeah.
kind of a cousin of sport media, but I think many of the same things apply. I assume everybody who's in that program is in it because they have a passion for sports. I know some other kids who have been in it. If you're getting into something because it's what you think you want to do, it's what you love, then keep that attitude. Do something because you love it. You're going to have a career for 40 years, which is like twice as long as you guys have been alive right now. It's a long, long time. So I fully support doing something you love in whatever field it is. But the two bits of advice I always give are work hard, whatever it is you're doing. The more people love something, the more they're going to work at it. I don't know how many students are in your program, but they've all got dreams and they all want to work hard and they all think they're going to get somewhere pretty cool. So I'm not saying to look at the person beside you as your enemy or anything like that, but whatever stream it is you get to, whatever your first job is, whatever summer internships or volunteering opportunities you get, take them. Knock on that door and take them, but be prepared to work hard because there are a lot of people in this industry, and mine and yours, who work hard. And the other thing is be a good teammate. Certainly in sports broadcasting, I'm part of a team. Analyst, reporter, statistician, audio, video replays, producer, director, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not about me. It's about us as a team putting the best show that we can on the air. And in sport management, there are so many different avenues for that, but you're always going to end up working with other people. Be a good teammate. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a job. Everybody matters. So I think the more you make it about the team, whatever your team is, the better off the individuals come out looking as well.
That's some great advice. Some key takeaways: work hard, knock on that door, and be a team player. I think that's pretty important for anyone trying to get into the industry and be a successful professional overall. So thank you for that advice, Stan, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and offer your valuable insights.
All right, guys. My pleasure to do it. Enjoyed it. Good luck going forward.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, we'll let you know. We'll send you an email, tag you on Twitter, whatever, when this comes out.
Cool.
Should be about next week, the week of the 20th.
All right. Sounds good.
Amazing. Thank you. All
Thanks,
right.
Dan.
Guys.
Have a good one.
You too. See you later.